beyond our thinking, beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She is the founder of Crown Yourself and CEO of Communicating Queens, certified performance and business coach and visibility strategies, international TEDx speaker, and of course a best-selling author with a multiple award-winning book, Make Every Podcast Want You. Other than Miss Kimberly Spenceri.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Daniel. I am so honored to be here with you.
Welcome, Miss Kimberly on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I know?
So I have been in business. I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. So this is my fourth business. I currently run two. I started out as a freelance Pilates instructor to support myself in writing films. I had my dream come true at 24. I had my first film that I co-wrote named Bro, starring Danny Trejo. It came out, Lionsgate distributed it. It was on Netflix. It was in the last round of Blockbuster. And I had this dream come true at 24, and I realized, like, what else is there to give? Like, what else do I want, and what else do I want to create in this world? And it wasn't just writing more movies. And I had my Pilates business to support myself in screenwriting. I started focusing on that, and then I became an e-commerce business owner from that, because I came on board a project as a consultant initially, and then I saw the product. I said I could sell this because of my history in Pilates. And from there, I was part of that company as president for 2 years. I got bought out, had a successful exit, and then we literally signed the buyout agreement 3 weeks before I got married, jetted off on my honeymoon, and I was like, what's next? What do I come back to? And that was where we came up with the concept, me and my husband. We were brainstorming, and I was thinking of all of the areas in which I'd had success. I'd had relational success with meeting my amazing husband. I'd had body success of overcoming a 10-year battle with bulimia. I had financial and business success and being an e-commerce president and having my Pilates studio. And I was thinking of all these areas, and I thought, this is kind of like running an empire. And I leaped off the couch and I said, crown yourself. And my husband goes, what's that? And I said, that's the name of my company. And he's like, what do you do? And I said, like something like Marie Forleo. So I didn't quite know what I was doing for about a year and a half. I dabbled. I made about $115 in that first year, which was embarrassing, but amazing, because I was figuring it out. And it was through that figuring it out process that I realized my mindset was nowhere as sharp as it had been when I was going for screenwriting, when I had started my Fitness with Kim Pilates studio, when I had jumped on board as president. My mindset was very much in a space of blame, shame, and comparison. And I realized that was a mindset that I'd changed already from 10 years of bulimia. And I knew I had a mindset block. I knew I could change the story that I was telling myself in my head. And I found out I was pregnant, and I knew I had a 9-month deadline to do that. And then that's when everything shifted. And from there, I went on and scaled and grew Crown Yourself. We've been in business for over a decade. And then in 2022, we started our sister company, Communication Queens, which is all about supporting our clients in building an authority asset ecosystem that leverages their podcast or their books and gets them booked on other podcasts to support in building out their visibility, because conversations create conversions. So we started those empires in essence, and I now run the two of them while raising my 3 beautiful children.
Thank you for sharing your empire to the world, Miss Kimberly. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom as well. So let's talk about your book itself, award-winning book, and congratulations. Your
Thank
book op-
you.
Yes, your book opens with a gripping personal story of being stranded in Australia during the pandemic lockdown, far from family, with your business on life support. What is the moment of extreme pressure that specific framework for this book was born? Or did it plant a seed that grew over time?
Well, podcast guest, like we started with the very dramatic, like we were stranded in COVID. We were stranding in Australia during COVID. And that experience was an experience of intentional choice because we thought, oh, we've always wanted to live abroad in Australia. How long can this pandemic thing last? Ha ha ha. And we've thought, okay, well, they're saying 2 weeks. I said, well, our visas last for 3 months. Let's give it a go. We've always wanted to live abroad. We've always wanted to live in Australia. 2 weeks turned into 2 years, and we were over there, and that was where I realized our lead generation was on life support because my primary form of lead generation was live events. So going to live events, speaking at live events, facilitating live events. I have a saying that when I'm live, I thrive. And I looked and I said, well, I can't do live events in Australia because of my visa, even though we were in like what I call the Florida of Australia. So everything was very open so long as we didn't leave the state. But everything was very open and very safe. But that experience, I said, well, what else can we do? And we started, it reminded me of a interview that I'd had that resulted in a $10,000 coaching contract. I said, oh, what if we double down on podcast guesting? That's what we did. Within 50 interviews, we generated $70,000 of new business revenue. Fast forward, we've generated over $250,000 in new business revenue from guest podcasting alone. And so I decided to write a book on it because in 2021, I lost 3 family members and 2 family friends, one including my father. And after processing the grief for 2 years, in 2024, I was really hit hard with the death tax. And the death tax is when you look back at the end of your life and you're like, what would I regret not becoming? And I was so honored to have in that year of 2021 a conversation with my aunt just a few days before she passed. And it was a conversation that I will remember for the rest of my life because we got to talk about her life, what she regretted, what she wished she could have done, what she, and one of the things she said to me, she said, Kim, you've always been so courageous. And I've always really admired that. And I was thinking, like, here's a 73-year-old woman and she's admiring me. Like, she admires me for my courage. And fast forward to 2024, I was thinking about who did I want to become? If this was my last year to live on this planet, what would I regret not becoming? And the answer was so clear. It was a solo best-selling author. And I had started probably 3 books by then in my Scrivener file, which is like a writer's software. I'd started books about a decade ago that I'd said were going to come out. They didn't come out. I always had business as being my excuse because something would always come up in the business. I would need to hire more team. We'd be onboarding new clients. We would have new members into our program, something new. There was always something to do with the business. The business was my greatest excuse. But I always loved writing. I've always been a writer. I write pretty much all of my posts. Some of our emails are translated from AI, but for the most part, like I have been writing for a decade of producing content that I personally have written. And I've always identified as a writer. I started out in screenwriting. So that experience of really reflecting on death, I said, well, I have to write a book that correlates to my business or else I'm going to talk myself out of it. I have to write a book that allows for both of my businesses to thrive. So Make Every Podcast Want You does, it does show my positioning as a business coach in high performance. And it also shows our positioning as a consulting agency with Communication Queens. So it feeds both the businesses. So I had to have it make sense logically, or else I would talk myself out of doing it. And then I just sat down and I started writing. And 2024 came around and I realized I wanted this book out by International Podcast Day, which is September 30th. I wasn't close to finishing and I grabbed an Airbnb, locked myself away for 3 days, passed my 2 boys off to my husband and said, you and my mom are watching them and I'm going to go write and finish this dang book. I finished it. For the most part, I was about 10,000 words shy of finishing. I ended up banging out those next 10,000 words the next weekend. And then we were off to the races. And the book really it's a labor of love. It's about podcast guesting as a strategy. Yes, it teaches you how to get booked on podcasts, how to pitch to podcasts, how to be an amazing guest. But ultimately, the book teaches storytelling and communication. And when we can understand the value of storytelling in our communication, humans have connected over stories since the dawn of time. Like, since humans have been around, we have connected around campfires over stories. And the more stories you tell, if you tell the right ones, they can position you beautifully for your next level, your next client, your next opportunity. So long as you bring your full self to them, your presence, your energy, your life force, and you don't share them like you have shared this multiple millions of times before, but you share and you bring a full engaged presence, recognizing that you're speaking to an entirely new audience every time who haven't heard your story. Most of them haven't. And being able to bring your full presence to it, and how do you bring that energy? How do you make yourself seem interesting? And I share countless stories from many of our clients around, either it's a trauma story, or it's a story around their success, or a story around what they've achieved, or the stories around like the boring bits where you don't necessarily have to have a gigantic, dramatic, cinematic trauma story to share on a podcast. You can share a very simple story about your upbringing and why that drew you to what it is that you do. I give reference to a client of mine who's in personal branding, and she's like, "I didn't have any trauma. I didn't have any, like, gigantic cataclysmic events didn't happen to me." She's like, "I lived a really normal life, but I just love personal branding." And it turned out that it was just because she had not, as a middle child, had not had much of her voice expressed. She felt suppressed in sharing her voice because she had two other siblings that she had to kind of fight for attention for. And that's why she fell in love with personal branding, and like how she could give her voice a voice and how to give other voices a voice. And I said, that's just as much a powerful story for every person who doesn't necessarily have a gigantic cataclysmic trauma story. I think when we learn to honor that our stories are going to serve exactly who needs to hear them. Like, for me, not everybody is going to resonate with wanting to build empires and have a massive global impact. Some people just want to support their family. So in those people, then I get to connect as like, me too. I just want to support my kids. Like, I want to teach them, train them, nurture them to be leaders of the new worlds. Like, I want them to be set up for success, to be happy and thriving, just like every other parent. So learning also how to tailor your stories and how to adapt your stories for the audience in which you're serving. That's what the book teaches.
Very well said, Miss Kimberly. Before becoming a high performance coach, your path included being a screenwriter, instructor, and even Miss Congeniality. How did
Yep.
each of these distinct roles teach you something about crafting a narrative connecting with an audience that you are used in your communication queen's methodology?
Yeah, so I love beauty pageants. I'm on a show called Damon John's Next Level CEO, that's coming out in July. Um, and as I'm going through and like we're gathering all the B-roll, I found one of my old pageant videos from my first beauty pageant that I did when I was 15 years old. And I got in the top 5 of that pageant, and in the top 5, then you have to answer that question. And I'm sure if you've been on the internet for a minute, you have seen the pageant girls who flub and fibble and, like, dribble over their words because something it people don't realize how nerve-wracking it is. And I saw the video of me and I was like, "Oh my gosh, how cringe, like total cringe." I was so awkward. I was talking about something I talk about today. I was talking about authenticity, but I was so nervous. And back then I was not authentic. I was trying to be this perfect version of myself, and I wasn't being truthful about that I was struggling with an eating disorder, and I wasn't being truthful about my relationship with my family. And I had so many secrets that were hidden in shame, and I'm there talking about authenticity. And I was like, "Oh, that's a girl that's out of alignment." But you know what? I am so grateful for her. I am so grateful for her courage, for her bravery in being able to be there and stand on that stage and try. And I think that that's one of the things that so many entrepreneurs desire, is they want the overnight success, but they don't realize it takes 10 years to get there. And I had a client about a year ago, who knew, because I did my TED Talk in 3 weeks. So like I literally got the TED Talk, had to write, prepare, perform, like practice, perform, and deliver my TED Talk within 3 weeks. And my client was in this like long TED become a TEDx speaker program with another coach. And she was like, oh, she's in the middle of it. And she called me up and she's like, I am not loving this program. I am struggling. I feel like, she's like, I keep on thinking of you and how you did your TED Talk in 3 weeks and how like maybe I can just do it. Like maybe I can wing it. And I was like, first of all, TED Talk, not something you actually just want to wing it. But second of all, like I didn't wing it. I just knew I had 20 years of theater, performing, public speaking. And by then I'd done over 150 podcasts talking about my life, my business, my one big idea, which is about that you are a warrior for possibility. You are your life, your story is a testimony for possibility. And it just so happened that the theme of the TED Talk was possibility. But I've been talking about mindset for literally years, and I'd done 150 podcast episodes, and I'd been performing, speaking, and writing for decades. So it was decades that collapsed into 3 weeks where I didn't like, there was pressure to perform, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was fully within my stretch zone, not my comfort zone, but my stretch zone, so that I knew that I could deliver it. And I told her, I said, how many years have you actually been performing in public speaking? And she was like, oh, I've only been doing this for 3 years. I said, well, get a couple more decades under your belt. And I guarantee you probably too will be able to do a TED Talk in 3 weeks. But it takes, like, we want the overnight success. We want, and I've talked with many other clients as well about like the big press opportunities, like being featured in Forbes or being on Netflix or being in on a New York Times billboard. And so many of us think like, oh, this is my thing. This is my moment. This is the thing that's gonna launch me into the world. That's very, very, very rarely the case. More often than not, it's the press that comes from the press. It's not you just showing up and doing your thing and having that be like the moment that everybody suddenly goes, oh my gosh, I need to hire her. I need to work with her. I need to buy her stuff. It's more often the press that comes with the press, and then repetition, the boring aspect of repetition and practice and constantly sharing your message. And I had a client just the other day who was like, I feel like I'm sharing the same message on my about page on my website, in my speech, in my keynote, in on podcasts. And I said, you are, but you're sharing it to different audiences who have never met you. And thus they're going to receive it differently. They're going to receive, and you're going to know, and you're going to start to see and hear how to shift your story, how to make it land, how to improve it as you go along and put it into practice. But for the most part, everybody walking around who is choosing to give you and pay you their attention is only thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about, your website about page has a similar about to your keynote. No, they're thinking, how does this person help me? How can I get value from this? How can I grow from listening to this person? How is this person going to help me? And so when you recognize that it's not really about you, it's always about them, and that all you have to do is 80% of success is just showing up to the table. It's showing up, it's having the audacity, and it's putting in your reps. You got to get in your reps.
Beautifully articulated, Miss Kimberly. In a podcast interview, you contrasted the public personas of Jennifer Lawrence and Anne Hathaway to illustrate the power of authenticity. Was there a specific moment in your own career when you realized that letting go of a perfect image and embracing your real self was not just liberating, but a better business strategy?
Yeah, I actually it was in 2018, and I was sharing on a podcast about the time that I was assaulted. And it was in that moment that I shared with the podcast host, and the podcaster goes, "Oh my god, I think that was me too. I think that same thing. I've just never put the label on it. And then from that story, I had like several people come into my world who were like, "Oh my gosh, I realized that that happened to me too." And what you said by sharing that story, it unlocked something in me. I feel like I'm seen and I'm heard. And the thing about stories is like when you share a story that is supposed to have like shame attached to it, when you strip it of the shame and you share it, it shame disappears. Shame loves secrets. Hiding those stories that you're ashamed of are actually some of your greatest superpowers underneath if you have the courage to share it. And from sharing that story, one of my clients went on to manifest her dream husband because I sent her the podcast and she's like, "Oh my God, I realized that that happened to me too." And it came from this ripple of having the courage to step out in faith, to share a part of my story that people would, that maybe people would judge or maybe people would feel bad for, or maybe people would take the wrong impression. But I was going to share it authentically and truthfully, and I was gonna allow myself to be courageous and open about it. And that was a huge moment and turning point in my business where I was like, "Oh, I'm getting a lot more people coming into my world because I'm honest about life what life experiences I've had, but I'm also honest and not blaming other people for this. I'm not stuck in a victim mindset. I'm saying what I learned from it. I'm saying how I learned to defend myself, how I learned to stand up for myself, how I learned about my belief systems, I got to question these old plagiarized programming that I had been stuck in of belief systems of shame and guilt, and how that allowed me to have freedom. And ultimately, everyone wants freedom. And sometimes that's freedom from who you have been, or freedom from the shame, or freedom from the guilt that you've carried for decades about an experience that was not your fault. But it is your responsibility to heal, to move through, to alchemize. And there is so much power in that when you recognize that you have that power. And so when I saw how much that me sharing my story and these authentic parts of myself in true vulnerability, and not from like preaching from a pedestal about vulnerability of saying you should be vulnerable, but me truly sharing something that was very, very vulnerable. And in that experience, having people come and flock to me frankly, really quickly, like that was like after that we had our first 13K month, and then some. And then it, because it came from sharing from this space of truth, authenticity, vulnerability, but not preaching it, actually demonstrating it, actually embodying it, actually doing the thing that most people are scared to death of, which is being seen and being heard, even though so many people crave that. They crave that significance in their life. You just have to have the courage to claim it.
Empowering answer, Ms. Kimberly. The book is described as a feeling like conversation with a business bestie, blending practical advice with deep emotional honesty. How do you maintain the balance of high level strategy and genuine human connection in your own life without burning out?
I take rest, and I also rest within the roles because I run 2 companies. I'm a mom of 3 young kids. My kids are 8, 4, and 1. So, and I have an amazing husband and a mom who lives with us as well. And so, like being able to navigate that, I rest within my role. So, CEO role stops and mom role goes on. And so I get to put my brain on pause. And then when CEO role is on, mom role gets to take a pause. And so I'm able to rest within the roles. I also am very aware of when I need help and support. And typically, frustration, I heard this said by a business mentor, and I'm forgetting her name at the moment, so I can't take credit for it. But frustration is due to a lack of systems. And my Virgo heart was so happy to hear that, because when I can feel myself starting to almost to steam and then to get to that boiling of frustration, I know that a shift needs to happen. And that can be, I just need to ask for support from my husband. I need to ask for something. I need clarity. I may need a moment alone. I may need to sit down and think about something, but a decision needs to be made to move forward in a different direction because something is not working. And I allow myself the humility. I think that that's a big one with leaders, is saying, like, especially solopreneurs, as you're first getting started. This was huge for me when I first was getting started, because when you're first getting started, you're in the role, you're in every role, and you're wanting to do all the things. And the hard part is surrendering the good to get to the great, because our egos are clinging to this. I can be it all. I can prove it all. Let me prove them. I can show them all that ego that comes into starting a business. And we have to surrender that and start surrendering our control, which is hard for a recovering control freak like me, former perfectionist, being able to say, I need support. I'm not going to be able to do it all. And I tell all my clients, you can absolutely can have it all if you don't do it all. If you do it all, you will not have it all, because you will burn yourself out.
Well done, Miss Kimberly. To wrap up our discussion for today, if a listener takes one thing away from your book or your podcast appearances, is that their life story is a testimony for possibility. Looking forward, or what's one impossible possibility that you are currently trying to make real for yourself, your family, or community of entrepreneurs you serve?
Ooh, what's one impossible? I mean, I can say I don't believe in impossibility, but I'm sure my subconscious mind would probably be like, yeah, you kind of struggle with a couple goals that I haven't yet achieved. And I think that
Mhm.
that's in recognizing the timing of things and in trusting that all things will come. Everything, as long as you don't quit, all things are possible. Like, literally, we live in an era of, there's so much possibility. Like, you just can chat GPT for an answer. Like, you can, it's not just Googling it and having to search through it. You can, like, literally get the instruction manual for how to do something if you have the curiosity and you're able to ask the right questions. And for me, the big goal that we're going for, um, has really been to increase our the generational legacy for our kids, and not just in passing down wealth, but in helping them build legacy and learn skill sets. Skill sets are how generational wealth is actually passed down, not just giving them money. Um, so my big impossible goal is, in which I don't think is impossible. I truly believe I was put on this planet to guide my children into this way, but is being able to navigate, grow, build multi-million dollar businesses and raise successfully 3 children while being also a present mom. Like, for most people, that seems pretty impossible. And I do face my own belief systems on a daily basis with the level of impact and goals that I have. So, but at the same time, I'm meeting them, I'm recognizing them, I'm shifting them in real time. And every day is a great new opportunity to say, I trust my pacing. And that's what I'm leaning into the most right now, is I'm trusting my pacing, that everything I've wanted, I've been able to manifest just in time. And the few goals that have slipped through my fingers, they're going to come if I just trust my pacing.
Well, Miss Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite the listeners to support your book, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, if you love this podcast and you love listening to podcasts, then head on over to crownyourself.com/podcast and subscribe to the Crown Yourself podcast on all your favorite platforms. If you want to learn how to be a better communicator, be a better guest, and leverage podcast guesting to grow your business, head on over to makeeverypodcastwantyou.com. And you will get, not only when you get the book, you will get 10 free resources to support you in your journey of sharing your story. And if you just want to have a deeper, more personal connection, head on over to Instagram at kimberly.spencer. That's my handle, Kimberly.Spencer, and connect with me personally over there.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Kimberly Spencer because if you support her for sure, more and more empowering, well, business like this to come, podcast as well as the book itself. So I have one more question, Miss Kimberly. You describe yourself as a trauma-informed coach
Mhm.
and a warrior for human potential. How does understanding the neuroscience of trauma and unconscious communication make someone a more effective, empathic, and memorable podcast guest?
Well, understanding trauma in general means that you're also on the other side of your own trauma for the most part. So you get to speak from the scars, not the wound. And being able to like give grace to other people on their journey, that not everybody's going to understand your perspective, and the neuroscience of understanding how important your language is. And so being able to practice your communication, know that you're not going to always get it right, but practice your communication. Listen, not just to listen to the language and how you're sharing about your experiences. Is there an energy of blame? Is there shame? Is there complaining? Is there are you practicing what you preach with reflection? Like, all of these pieces are aspects of understanding that every person has their own variation of trauma, and some may relate to your story, some may not, but to always teach from the scars, not the wound. That's huge. Because otherwise you're like bleeding out shame all over the place, and we don't need any more shame in this world. We need more courageous leaders. And from that, being able to recognize where in your story are you sharing the courageous moments, the moments you spoke up, the moments you raised your standards, the moments you held your boundaries, the moments you chose to lean in when everything in you said, I'm not ready. And being able to recognize that just by sharing your story, it's not saying you should do this. Like, that's a huge thing with communication and trauma, because so often people, you don't know what someone should do. You don't have their karma. You don't know that. Like, I do know what I did, and hopefully through in my story, you or someone else will see themselves in bits or parts or some of it, that you can take the meat that works for you and spit out the bones.
Very well said, Miss Kimberly, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, much come, people. See you soon. So, Miss Kimberly,